on. It's a little
It's not as bad?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want that off. I can't see. All right, I'll try this again. Jeff Davis. Charles Edmonds. Rick Stouffer.
Mr. Stouffer is on the call-in line. This is Vicki Evans. He is called in.
Did you ask if he would click on the link? Is he having an issue getting in?
Let me check with him just a moment. Mr.
I
Stouffer?
checked with Jeff Davis, and he's trying to connect.
They're asking if you're on the meeting notice, if you can go down, can you click on the join the Microsoft Teams?
Made it yet. Charles Edmonds.
Can you?
I'm actually on my cell phone.
Okay. Can you hear them? I have the microphone. You can hear them?
I can hear very well.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll give them a couple more minutes, so we have to give them all the time they need.
Excuse me. Mr. Stouffer is calling from his cell phone, but he can hear you. He can hear the conversation.
All right.
Okay.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
Can he also speak if we need to ask him a question? Will we hear him?
If I have to ask a question, I'll just butt in.
Okay,
Okay.
got you. We can hear you.
All righty. Thank you.
All right, so we'll try to see if Jeff and Charles make it here.
Smartphone connected.
Ooh. All right, Jeff Davis or Charles Edmonds?
I've got Jeff on the speakerphone here, so he won't be virtually on the call, but he'll be coming through my speaker. So Jeff, why don't you go ahead? Correct.
Okay, we can hear you. That's good. How you doing, Jeff?
Really good. How you doing?
That's good. Great. So we're missing Charles. Has anyone tried to contact him?
I can see if I can get him on this call as well. Let me see if I'm checking.
Yeah, it's somebody else there from your group.
But I'm going to try.
Maybe they could, I don't know if you can handle a three-way or not like that.
I'm going to give it my best shot. All right, so I've got Charles and Jeff Davis on my portable speakerphone here.
Cool. And they can both hear, so that's good. Then we do have a quorum. So what I would like to do is call this meeting, Trinity Rail Express Advisory Committee to order. We're doing this with a conference meeting, and we appreciate everybody's indulgence in that. So it's April 15th and around 2:36, and we will start the meeting. We've called that to order, taken roll, and everyone is here. So the next item is just a safety briefing. If we could roll through that real quickly, I would appreciate that.
Okay, Gary, before I start the presentation safety briefing, I thought it'd be a good idea just to have a quick overall safety briefing as we're all working at home. I thought the appropriate topic would be COVID-19, life and managing stress. During the outbreak of COVID-19, it can be very stressful for all of us. Fear and anxiety can be overwhelming. It can also lead to strong emotions in adults and in children. Some of the symptoms of infectious disease stress can be fearing, worrying about your health and that of your loved ones, changes in our sleep and eating patterns, difficulty sleeping or concentrating in general, worsening of any chronic health problems that we may already have, worsening of anyone with mental health issues, and it could lead to increased use of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. We all react differently to stressful situations, especially when it comes to infectious disease outbreaks. Studies have shown it's determined how you cope with it based on your background, things that make us different as individuals, as well as the communities that we live in. People may respond more strongly to stress in a crisis, and these are some of the individuals and how they react. Older people and people with chronic diseases who are at higher risk for contracting infectious disease, children and teens, people who are helping with the COVID response, such as our first responders, doctors, and our other healthcare providers, people who have mental health conditions, and as well as people who are suffering from substance abuse. Taking care of oneself, our friends and our family is one mechanism to help cope with this stress, because that way we know that everyone's okay, and if they're not, we'll assist them and get the attention they need. And helping all of us cope with the stress can make our community stronger. Some of the ways that we can cope with stress in the interim is to take breaks from either watching, reading, or listening to news stories, including social media, where we're constantly hearing about the infectious disease outbreak. Take care of our bodies, take deep breaths, stretch, and even meditate. Make sure that we maintain a healthy, balanced meal. Try to exercise regularly whenever possible. Get plenty of sleep. Avoid alcohol and drugs. Make time to unwind and do things or participate in activities that you enjoy as much as you can. And then finally, connecting with others. Talking with people about our concerns and how we feel will be very beneficial in helping us deal with just daily life and stress for COVID-19. Okay.
Thank you, Anthony.
You're welcome. Okay, so our safety briefing, our days without lost time injury for transportation, maintenance of equipment, we've gone 582 days. For our maintenance away and maintenance of signal department employees, we've gone 82 days. Our safety observations for FY20, fiscal year 20, right now for quarter 2, we completed 105 observations. For our total observations for FY20, we're at 257. And last year, our FY19 total safety observations are at 495. I just want to add at this, as far as our safety observations, they've currently been suspended due to the need to maintain social distancing and minimize contact. So as soon as we get the okay to proceed with normal activities, we will pick that activity back up as well. Next slide, please, slide 4. Okay. So
we'll not move on yet because I have one more thing to do, which is the approval of the minutes from the November 7th, 2019 meeting. All board members have those minutes. Let me ask if anyone has any modifications to those minutes. If not, they will stand approved as written. So with that, Anthony, I'll let you go forward.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Okay, let's move on to slide 5. Okay, our TRE monthly ridership for FY20 compared to FY19, we were trending up, as you can see in the blue, until we get to around February, we start to see a slight decline, and then in March, you see a decline of FY20 versus FY19. Next slide, please, slide 6. And so if you look at a comparison, I added some extra slides so we could get an idea of the impact COVID-19 is having on our ridership. So if you look at March of 2020, we had a total monthly ridership of 110,765. But in March 2019, we had a total ridership of 161,629. So just to summarize, our ridership in March 2020 was down 31.47% compared to the same time last year. I also decided to do a comparison of February, and we were down 34% compared to February of 2020. Next slide, please, slide 7. Again, this is a caption of our TREAC average weekday ridership, and as you can see, we started off FY20 with a bang, as I'll say. Ridership was gradually picking up, maintaining steady, and then in March, we see that decline. Next slide, please, slide 8. So again, I looked at the impact that COVID-19 had. Our average weekday ridership ended up being 4,585 compared to 6,710 in March. So what we noticed was a 31.7% decline in ridership compared to the same time last year. But I also noticed a 33.4% decline in ridership compared to February 2020, which is just last month. Next slide, please, slide 9. Again, average Saturday ridership, as you can see, we were trending very well. And then in March, we took a downward turn. Next slide, please, slide 10. Again, I looked at the impact COVID had. For March 2020, our average Saturday ridership was 1,678 compared to 2019, where we averaged 4,143. That, in turn, caused a 59.5% decline from the same time last year and a 55.6% decline from February of 2020, the previous month. Next slide, slide 11, please. Again, our total boardings, as you can see, pretty much we were doing well. Next slide, slide 12, please. So I looked to see what impact COVID had for March 2020 compared to 2019. As you can see, in March 2020, we actually trended very well. We had 964,043 boardings compared to 2019 of 954,563. So we actually saw an increase, almost a percentage increase there. And our total boardings, though, for March 2020 compared to our previous month, showed a decrease of 29.2%. Next slide, please, slide 13. Our total boardings per station, and I broke this up so you could get a good view of FY20 quarter 2 versus FY19 quarter 2. Next slide, 14, please. As you can see, our total boardings for 2020 was 110,765 compared to March 2019, same time last year, 161,629. What I noticed was Q2 was down for 31.5% compared to the same time last year. And then I compared March 20 to February 20 and saw a 29.2% decrease. Next slide, slide 15, please. So I decided to do an overall view, and these next slides will give you an idea of the impact that COVID had on TRE. I decided to do an apples-to-apples comparison instead of looking at the whole month. I decided to take the days in March, which I did 20th to 31st, where we started to really see a decline. So this slide is just giving you February 22 to the 29th of 20, so you can get a picture of what the ridership was like the previous month. Next slide, slide 16. So in March 2020, from 20th to 31st, our total ridership 20,460, and then I looked at our combined average. It was 1,705. Our weekday average was 1,443, and then our Saturday average of 262. Next slide, please, slide 17. In comparison, 2019 for the same time period, you notice we had a total ridership of 61,553. We had a combined average of 5,129. Our average weekday ended up being 4,532, with our Saturday average being 598. Next slide, slide 18, please. So on slide 18, I put it all together, and our combined average for March 2020 for the period of 20th to 31st, 1,705, showed a 66.8% decline from the same time of March 2019. And also compared to last month, it showed a decline of 69.8%. For our average weekday of 1,443, we show a 68.2% decline from the same time period in March of 2019, and from the previous month of February, a 70.70% decline. Our average Saturday ridership for 262 showed a decline of 56.2% from the same time in 2019 of March, and also a 63.1% decline prior month of February 2020. And of course, our Sundays is always going to be zero because we don't do Sunday service. This year we did, and due to some of the cancellation of events, you won't see Sunday service on here, so that's why that's zero. Next slide, please, slide 19. So basically, in summation, what I noticed was our ridership during our COVID quarantine period was down 66.8% compared to the same time last year, and 69.8% compared to the prior month. Our weekend ridership was down 56.2% versus the same time last year. Overall, due to this decline in ridership, TRE was compelled to reevaluate its service, and the decision was made to go to a schedule reduction. TRE normally operates 68 trains Monday through Thursday, 70 trains on Friday. With the decline in ridership, we decided that adapting a Saturday schedule, Monday through Saturday, of operating 42 trains, that we would be able to handle the ridership. And of course, the Saturday service remained unchanged. Next slide, please, slide 20. For our OTP, we're trending pretty good. And you can see, for the month of March, we had 97.92. Actually, right now in April, we're currently sitting at 98.62 with a year-to-date average of 95.12. I did compare, just to give you an idea, from October or March of 2020, we had a rolling average total of 95.02% compared to fiscal year 19, where our rolling average was about 94.94% at this time. Next slide, please. Slide 21. Okay, on slide 21, this gives you an overview of the number and percentage of trains that were delayed for fiscal year 20 quarter 2. I highlighted some sections so you could gravitate towards where I saw issues in that time period. In January, February, March, as you see, mechanical presented some challenges for us. I will give a precursor to this. The numbers 22 and 19 in January and February, a lot of those delays occurred in one day. We had about 11 delays in January, and I think we had about 10 or 11. And that was due to main engine failure in January, and in February we had a locomotive that had a problem with the throttle, which is what makes the locomotive go. These trains, unfortunately for us, had that mechanical issue in either single track or in a place where we were unable to run around, and so we had to get rescue equipment to get it out. So that's what caused that to trend down. Also highlighted signals. In February, you see we had 22, which is very unusual for signals. Again, a lot of that occurred in one day. We had a control module in one of the signal houses near Centerport to go bad, and it necessitated us what we call talk trains by the signaling system. So all trains would come up to Centerport, they would get a red signal. The dispatcher had to verbally give the trains permission to go by the signal. So, of course, that takes time. Also, we had some PTC issues. I won't get too much into that. Claude's got that on his slide. But I will say, as you can see, as we progressed through the quarter, they declined, and there's a reason for that. And then the next we had was weather in January. We had a series in January, I don't know if you all recall, where we were having flash flood warnings. We had a lot of tornado warnings. We have tornado warnings on our system, and they're in our affected service area. our rules dictate the trains must stop until that warning is cleared. So that's why you see a large number there in January, but then it disappears after that. Next slide, please, slide 22. And this is just a graph to show you the percentage and to highlight the areas where we have problems. Again, if you see mechanical, signal, weather, and PTC were our top factors that and challenges we face. Next slide, please, slide 23.
Anthony, could you hold on 1 second, please?
Yes.
Mayor Slegel, there's a couple of questions that I'm seeing that they have, and before we go into the quarter.
Yeah, I was going to do that.
Okay, great, thank you.
I was going to suggest that we, since Anthony had run through 3 of these items, that if anybody has any questions on any of them, please ask them. I guess we'll start with the subject he's on right now, on the operations report.
Yes, Gary, I've got a question.
Yes, sir, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Anthony. I think that, and I appreciate you calling out the ridership decrease in March, because that's clearly an anomaly, and I think we all expected that. My question is actually about the previous 3 months, December, January, and February, which were all up quite significantly, and I think that's an unexpected surprise. What do we attribute that increase to be from? Is that because the numbers were just low the previous year due to construction issues and some collision issues?
You're exactly right. The previous year we had a lot of, or quite a few accidents at crossings that took out some of our equipment. You also had weather-related events. Remember October, November, December, and actually you can throw September into that. It rained such that it canceled good portions of the fair, which is where we get a lot of our ridership. This year we had great weather, and actually our fair numbers were very good. It reflected that. Also, I think the weather contributed too. We had a lot of special events. You had the Stars and the Maps. When they started their seasons, we were seeing heavy ridership from that. You also were having special events in the area, and our riders or people in the region were taking advantage of TRE and going to those in concerts. So a lot of that is what we see as part of the increase for those ridership numbers.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, you had a comment on ridership as well?
Sure, just a real quick comment. As Mr. Kennedy said, the 3 months prior to March were really good. April, while we only have half a month, the ridership seems to have settled into about 85% down. We seem to be on a day-to-day basis hitting somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 trips a day. So about 85% down from where we typically would be. Now, the reality is this is pretty consistent with commuter systems across the country. New Jersey, BART are actually down closer to 90-95%, but 80-85% is what you would expect to see on most commuter systems throughout the U.S. So while it's down 85%, it's pretty consistent with other properties.
And I'd just like to add, to piggyback on what Gary said, the FRA has requested that we provide ridership data to them because they are tracking as well. And one of the things that our local chief inspector said to me was, we are doing very well compared to the rest of the systems around the country, as Gary said. So.
All right. Any other questions on anything that Anthony has discussed? If not, we'll move on then to the quarterly financial information.
Hi.
Okay.
Make sure.
Just a moment, I'll pull that up for y'all.
Okay. I don't know what you might have loaded. I'm not actually going to walk through all, page by page. Given our current economic and operating environment, the first quarter of this year and the end of last year is kind of ancient history. I'll go ahead and hit the highlights, but then I'd also like to take a moment and say a little bit about what I said to our board yesterday. unless Gary hits the mute button on me. But let me walk through the financial information. So for FY 2019 for the full year, passenger revenues were down 6%. Again, tracking ridership. And advertising, rent, and other were off 9%, and that's primarily driven by rail corridor rental, which decreased due to less utilization of the railroad by other entities. And for the first quarter of this year, it pretty much tracked the same, a little bit less of a decline year on year, but kind of the same story. And then for FY 2019, you had expenses increase overall. Primarily for FY 2019, it was driven by a tie replacement project, and that was the big driver, year-on-year costs. You also had, for the first quarter of this year, it was purchase transportation, but for both quarters, we pretty much were dead on budget, and so for FY 2019, although we had that tie replacement project, we had savings in other categories, including fuel and just sort of minor categories, but ended up on budget. For the first quarter of this year, what we did see was that increase in purchase transportation really was anticipated and so was built into the budget. So with both quarters pretty much ended up on budget. Happy to go into more detail on either quarter, but like I say, at this point, I think a little bit more of the focus is pretty much on what's going on now. But I'll pause there and see if there are some specific questions about those two quarters.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, it is kind of ancient history. So, what I'd like to reflect on. Yesterday we did have a board meeting at DART, and I had a briefing along with Gary at the Committee of the Whole, and we talked a little bit about the current economic and operating environment, responding to COVID. I put up some modeling that our department did, our finance department did, on what we think FY 2020 might look like, and more importantly, FY 2021. What we put in front of our board was a drop in sales tax, which is our biggest source of revenue, by 50% for the next 6 months, and then staying at that level for the next fiscal year. So pretty dramatic drop in sales tax. And then on the passenger revenue side, as was noted on the ridership side, what we modeled up was a 100% drop in passenger revenue. Now, we're not seeing that. We're seeing a small amount of passenger revenue, but just to avoid any noise, we showed a 100% drop in passenger revenue, and then some recovery as some of the shelter-in-place orders are lifted, some recovery back up and showing a kind of a slow climb on ridership, as well as a rebound in sales tax in the years past FY 2021. So that's what we modeled up for our board, kind of setting the stage for reviewing our operating costs naturally, looking at our capital projects and seeing what we could do to defer or maybe revisit some of those capital projects. So it's certainly a starting point of the conversation, folks. We at this point we haven't made any decisions, but I did want to paint a somber picture of what we all face. So I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Joe. Do we have any questions for Joe? All right. We will then move on to Gary Thomas, who will give us a COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I gave a briefing yesterday, as Joe mentioned, to our committee of the whole. And I won't go through that whole briefing. I started doing those briefings on March 10th, and then again on the 24th, and then again yesterday, talking about the three different levels, at least from our perspective, the three different levels being awareness and precautions, local outbreak, local epidemic, and local pandemic. And I think we would, most everybody would agree that we're at the local pandemic stage. Certainly, and the other thing that we identified when we first started going through that were the risks. And risk number one in priority order was the well-being of our employees. Number two was loss of ridership. Number three was loss of revenue, and so on and so forth. Joe talked a lot about loss of revenue, well-being of employees. I would like to point out that at 7:30 every morning we have our COVID call, if you will, and it's DART, Trinity Metro, and DCTA are all on that call. We talk about the relevant issues that each of us are dealing with, how we're dealing with them, and then making sure that we all benefit from whatever is happening that moment, and that we're coordinated in many of the things that we do. So, Bob, thank you for Wayne being part of that call every morning. We appreciate it. The other thing that we have talked about is the CARES Act, and specifically as it relates to certainly our employees, but also just being able to deal with some of the things that Joe talked about, the decline in ridership, the additional cost that we're all having to deal with. As everybody is aware, the third bill in the CARES Act actually dedicated $318 million to the North Texas UZA, which is then split among the different transit agencies. Transit, the $25 billion bill that went to transit certainly is unprecedented, and probably one that we'll never see again, certainly in my lifetime. Quite frankly, I hope not. But the good news is that there is money, that money was approved by the RTC this past Thursday at the RTC meeting. We're working as far as how that money is distributed from the FTA and what the requirements are, what the stipulations are. Now, there's the next part of this, though, is there's a lot of conversation about perhaps a fourth stimulus bill and maybe a fifth stimulus bill and what those include. There's been some conversation about a Heroes Fund and whether or not that's really going to happen. But I think the one that has probably gained the most amount of conversation is the stimulus bill. Now, unlike what we saw in the 2010-11 timeframe, that provided funding for capital projects that were shovel-ready. Or at least that's the way that one was dealt with. So as we've looked at different projects that might be projects that could be considered valuable or shovel-ready, or be shovel-ready, or be valuable if they were shovel-ready, Sheriff's Legal asked that I talk a little bit about a project that we've talked about for about the last year, or probably haven't talked about in the last year or so, and that is the use of the TREAC corridor for the high-speed train between Fort Worth and Dallas. If everybody remembers the high-speed train from Dallas to Houston is being done by the private developer, and there was a lot of conversation about how that was going to be extended from Fort Worth to Dallas, Dallas to Fort Worth, and what that might look like. A lot of that conversation did not include the TRE corridor, or at least TRE as part of that solution. It might have included our corridor, but we weren't really included as part of that solution. And we had actually gone through some of the analysis at that point in time and determined that we could actually do an express train between Fort Worth and Dallas, it would probably cost on the order of magnitude of about $500 million. And while that sounds expensive when you compare that to a true high-speed line that was being estimated at that point in time of between $3 and $4 billion to go between Fort Worth and Dallas, $500 million was a pretty efficient way to do it. Now, it didn't get you there as quickly. I think it, if I remember the analysis correctly, it cost $500 million and took 12 minutes longer. So essentially, what the region was, and we never got to this question, quite frankly. But what the question should be for the region is that the other $2.5 to $3.5 billion, is the 12 minutes worth $2.5 to $3.5 billion? And that was the question. Now, since that time, there's been a lot more conversation about Hyperloop, and so it's kind of veered away from high speed between Fort Worth and Dallas and to Hyperloop. And what Hyperloop is certainly an emerging technology. As many of you are probably aware, it's not quite there yet. Certainly not at the advertised 700 to 750 mile an hour. I know the test track at the test track unmanned vehicles got up to about 200, 250 miles an hour late last fall. But that's about where it is. I'm not aware of any manned test vehicles that have gone certainly at those speeds, and they're not at the advertised 700 miles an hour. So as we talk about this, I think the question that the Trinity Railway Express Advisory Committee needs to talk about is it worthwhile to go back and revisit this concept of an express train in the TRE corridor that we can take advantage of? Certainly, Bob and I have talked about the Stadler cars being capable of doing that and achieving the speeds that probably need to be achieved. But Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you. That's the general idea. That project is not shovel ready at this moment in time. As I said, there was some preliminary work done. There's some conversations had, but the region really never got to that question of, is that 12 minutes worth the $2.5 to $3.5 billion?
So if anybody has any comments, just state your name and then ask your question, or put it on the meeting chat if you have one. But it seems, Gary, I do have a question to start with, and that is, you said we're not shovel ready. What has to be done for this to be shovel ready? Assuming that we wanted to do it.
Yes, sir. We would need to enter into a contract, whatever type of contract it would be, to actually do the environmental clearance. Tim, help me, correct me if I'm wrong, certainly, but I think a lot of the environmental would be pretty straightforward along the existing railroad right-of-way. So that probably could be done relatively quickly, but you'd have to get that completed first, and then obviously enter into a design build type of contract, or be ready to do that. But between that, you'd have to get through the environmental and prepare the engineering documents. Or the way the Orange Line, we were able to do that with the Orange Line going to DFW back in 2010. And in that moment in time, the project happened to be, it was coincidental, quite frankly, but the project had just actually started. We'd actually just given the notice to proceed when the ARA funds became available. And within a week or two of that, so we were able to take advantage of that program then. But in this case, we'd need to go through the environmental. We'd need to get some up to some level of design to enter into that next stage.
How much time does that take, Gary? Would you estimate?
Tim, do you have an idea on the time it would take to get through the environmental and get to a 10 to 20% level of design?
Yeah, so the good news is that, if you remember, TxDOT had already done some of the environmental work. Now it may be on the verge of falling off the shelf, but, so we're not starting at ground zero. What we would have to do is pick that up. Generally, to get to a level of 10 to 20% design, it takes about 12 months to 18 months if we're moving pretty quickly. We may be able to do it sooner than that. A lot of it depends on opposition. If there's not a lot of opposition to the project, then, folks are comfortable when we're doing the environmental clearance moving faster through the process. If there's opposition, then generally, the process can be slowed down a little bit. But I would think a year and a half we could, probably get through that, maybe a little bit shorter, depending on the extent of the work that TxDOT has done. I know that, the work that they do for the highway department is not near as detailed as the work that all of us do when we're submitting through the Federal Transit Administration. And so there may be a little bit more work to do than what I realized, but the process has already started. So that's what I would think, Gary.
So if there is something approved for this, for infrastructure bill or whatever they're going to call it, do the projects, they're probably going to look at projects that are already shovel ready versus those that are working toward that end, I would think, but I don't know how that timing works.
On the last program, and Joe, you may have more specificity for this, but on the last program, there was certainly a window where you could work within to what the definition of shovel ready was. Our project, the Orange Line project, was already pretty much at the tail end of the process, and like I said, it was coincidental that we were ready to go at the same time the bill came out, so we were able to take advantage of it. But there were certainly a lot of projects that were in the early stages that needed to happen. So I don't know how they would define shovel ready, and Joe, you may have some other thoughts.
No, I think your recollection of the ARA process is right on. There was a window where you could get it to what they considered shovel ready. I would think this corridor, Tim might be a little conservative on that. It's an existing corridor, so I think we probably could move it along smartly. So this project might get into a window.
All right. Any comments from the Trinity Metro members regarding this project in terms of your thoughts on it?
I'd like, can you unmute me?
Go ahead, Charles, you're good.
Yeah, Charles Edmonds. It seems like we're on a lot of the same calls. I was on a 3-day conference call this past week, 18 hours, talking about transportation from all of the United States. And I know one thing, if you're not ready to go when the funds are available, you just get reslotted at the end of the line. And I would say if we're really serious about the line between Fort Worth and Dallas, that we need to do whatever it takes to be ready when the funds are available.
Okay. Nobody has a budget to do this, so I don't know how that works.
Do we have a budget number of what it would take to get us to a shovel-ready position? I think we own right away between the two cities and a couple of businesses, so we wouldn't have that expense.
Mr. Chairman, we can go back and look at, like I said, we did some work on this about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, and we can go back and refresh that work and take a quick look at what those costs might be to get us to a 10 to 20% level of design, assuming that we would do a design build project, and that's the level that we would need to get to. What that would cost us and how long it would take, with a little more specificity than what we're doing today, if that's the desire of the TREAC, and probably get that I don't think we'd want to wait and get that back to you at our next TREAC meeting, but get that back to you in the next couple of weeks through a memo, perhaps.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. Now, Jeff, what are your thoughts on this, if I might ask you, since you chair the other organization here?
Well, even if we can get a number that we think is realistic, aren't we still behind the 8 ball in terms of time? And it's possible if we do this scrambling effort and get in some slot, is it going to be too speculative at this point, or should we do it anyway?
Well,
I think well, certainly if we have the numbers, and let us look at it, if we can pull together the numbers and the time that it would take, at least I think it would give y'all the information to make a more informed decision on whether or not you should go to the next step or not.
yeah,
It can't hurt.
that's probably a good thing to do. Patrick Kennedy has a pretty interesting comment here, and I'll let you just articulate that, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gary, I was just wondering, is there a way to include some operational improvements into such a project if we were able to get it to shovel-ready and say it gets funded miraculously at 80% or whatever in federal dollars? Can we include some, like, Sunday service into that overall scope?
Well, traditionally it's only happened once in my career here, but they did not allow you to include operational dollars, but they may allow us to put in more sidings, double tracking, that will allow us to do Sunday service and still have the flexibility to maintain the railroad throughout the week. Bob, do you think that would be fair to say that that those would be capital dollars that we could then, I think, be pretty ready pretty quickly to do that?
You know, Gary, I think you bring up a good point. It certainly would enable us to be able to do Sunday service, where the drawback to Sunday service today is that we don't have that 24-hour shutdown to be able to do maintenance. So I would expect that if we would do the additional line and call it like a high-speed line or an express line along the right-of-way, it would give us the ability to run 7 days a week and still be able to shut down different parts of the line without having to have a bus bridge in every one of those instances. The additional thing would be the availability possibly to eliminate bus bridges where we could shift over to the other track when we did have a problem. So I think there would be some advantages, and certainly the big one would be if we did it right, to be able to run Sunday service and still have a maintenance window. Interesting. Thank you.
Mr. Kennedy, as I think about that more, of course, thinking out loud, as Bob said, if a lot of the double tracking on the eastern side of the region has been done in relatively small pieces, and if we came up with that third line, or the high speed, what could be the future high speed line, in maybe a more piecemeal solution, you could actually probably put a lot of that together pretty quickly. Now you'd have to connect the gaps at some point, but let us look at that. Trinity Metro and DART look at that and see if there's some things that we can do from a traditional perspective. If we said, okay, we're going to start with a new project. Here's how long we think it might take. Here's how much it might cost us to get to that 10 to 20% level. And then let's look at it from a little bit different perspective and say, all right, we want to enhance Sunday service, but the way we're going to do that is start basically putting pieces of what could be a future high-speed line together to give us that flexibility to make that work.
Okay.
I don't see Tim ringing his, shaking his fist at me or wringing his hands. So.
Your wish is my command, sir.
You're too kind.
Are there any?
The other thing that we may think about would be some bridging and other things. So as we're looking at that, there may be strategic bridging and other opportunities to connect that, or to have that third line that gives us that bypass capability. So we're on it.
Hey, Jeff Davis has a question. Jeff, go ahead.
I was just wondering about the vehicles. That certainly is, I don't want to say readily available, but how is that square into this kind of funding?
Well, and that's a good point, Mr. Davis, Chair Davis. Since we don't know what this bill might look like, it's hard to say, but we certainly do know that we're constantly struggling with vehicles along the corridor, and if there was an opportunity to purchase, for that capital expenditure to be the purchase of vehicles that could start to replace the existing fleet and at some point in time run a higher speed level of service, it might put us, it might also kind of start to piece this together.
Yeah, I like that.
That certainly would be something I'd be in favor of.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Mr. Stouffer, did you have a question?
If you guys don't mind, is there anyone on the board that would object to at least taking that snapshot look at it that Gary described?
Okay.
All right. With that, we'll assume that we'll hear something in a couple of weeks or however long that takes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Pardon me. Mr. Stouffer has a comment or question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I think it's well worth our effort to look at how we can do this. I mean, I think there's a few challenges we'll run into with some grade crossings. I can think of a couple, or only one in our city, because we've pretty much as we've double tracked through the area that DART has from to the section, we pretty well put in the grade separations. I can only think of one really there at MacArthur. But otherwise, I would think that we would be in pretty good shape to get down the road pretty far. I think that I'm agreeing with Gary. I think it was about a year and a half ago that we took a look at this, and there was some concern about elevating it through the whole area. But I think if there's an opportunity to elevate those areas and deal with a couple more grade crossings, then it probably would really work out well for everybody along the rail as well. So I think I appreciate what you all are saying. I think it's a great opportunity for us to look at that, and I also agree that we should probably start thinking about how we can use different vehicles on this line. I mean, the rail, the Silver Line that we're building right now, we're going to actually be bringing those vehicles along this rail line anyway down to the service station in Irving. So I think the more we think about using a different type or using a rail vehicle that's similar to what we're using along the Silver Line and what's being used on the Fort Worth side, I think is better for all of us to have something that's more upgraded and parts are more available and things of that nature. So I think looking at it from the perspective of upgrading the vehicles and the third track makes a lot of sense.
Very good. Thank you, Mary. Any other comments before we move on? All right. If not, item number 8 is update on TREAC capital projects.
Okay, thank you, sir. This is Megan, and I'm going to update for the capital project for FY19 and for DFW track work. And we're currently at a 33% level, and we anticipate and complete in August this year. As Mr. Costello mentioned earlier, and this big spending on this FY19 for track panels area, since we was planning for FY20 Sunday service. So we try to get all this improving completely in along the TRE corridor. And as you can see, we don't have any track panels project in FY20. On the FY20 for bridge panel replacement, we have 50% completed last week, and we are working on today, actually finish another 50% tonight for this track panel replacement. On turnouts, and this is number 11 turnouts that we're going to replace at the South Irving, and we are scheduling this year June, in the last week of June, to place those turnout. On closing panel replacement, we have completed in December. On the FY20 for bridge panel replacement, we are scheduled in September. And the same as on the turnouts and the crossing panels, so we are scheduling October this year.
Very good.
Next slide, number 27. This is just showing the pictures that we are for this crossing panel replacement in back to December. It was showing the previous condition. Next slide, 28. And those capital project, we are doing during the nighttime. So for this photo, you can see the headlight in the back. It's not really train coming to the crew, and it's working light. And since they are working this section during the nighttime. And next slide, 29. This is another location, Irving Heights, for this previous condition before the panel replacement. And next slide. 30s is in the section we cut in the panel, and we have the work train rock coming to this, toward our direction, putting a rock in this area. Next slide, and the 31. This is the complete photos for the Irving High project. Next one, 32, slide 32, and this is another project that we're doing, the Mockingbird bridge panel replacement, and this work was completed last week on the track 2, and we are working on the track 1 today tonight for complete the other side of the track panels. Next one, 33. Medical District Drive project update. We just had a meeting with the contractor and Dallas County regarding this project status. And based on current project status, and the contractor still staying on track, and we are planning to finish the track, turn back to Herzog doing the track work in June 18, and plan to cut over in July 4th. Next slide. 34. The current status, so on the west side of Bowman, and the contractor was completing the windwall footing, and currently they are working on the abutment footing and for the tying the steel. On the east side of Bowman, and we was have lots of conflicting with the utility in the past, in this, several months ago, and all those issues has been resolved, and the contractor complete all the testing, and we just received the testing report today. And currently they are installed this power line today. Next slide. Slide 35 showing this during the testing, power testing. We have to do each pile, existing pile testing, each one of them to utilize as part of the new structure support. Next slide. This is showing on the west side of Bowman, and this windwall footing. And currently there's the concrete has been poured and cured, and I'm not sure if you noticed this photo. We have the pipe actually touring to this the windwall footer, and actually this pipe is going to be removed, and the water is not really touring this to our foundation location, and the water actually flow to the Medical District Drive location. Next slide. This is presenting another project that we are working on, this Mockingbird Lane Bridge Strike. We got the bridge strike back to January 31st, and the truck passing through, and the arm in the back is didn't really lower down, so the whole arm is hitting the outside girder structures, causing the bottom girder structure, the bottom flange has twist. Next slide. Showing another view above the Mockingbird Lane and showing this location for this for bridge track location. Next slide. On the slide 39. So we're working with the finance group and also the risk management group. My understanding is from the risk management group is this location, the responsible party, they are agree with this damage, and so the work that we try to do, the claim, the insurance claims that we try to work on is, my understanding is we have to pay the repair first, and then we can send us a reimbursement and to this responsible party to get this payback for this portion of the repair. On this the repair cost estimate for engineer design is currently $35,000. Plus, total is $35,000, and the construction work is $100,000. The schedule work is 3 weeks for design and 48 hours for the construction. This particular one need to have a specialty for this contractor. They are knowing the strengthening outside girder process to make sure they are following this criteria and during the process repair without damaging the structural integrity itself. Okay, next slide. We are slide 40. Noble Branch Inwood design. So this location showing there's double track for Noble Branch, and there's a single track on the Inwood structure. The design has been completed, and we are working with procurement to get the RFQ out and to get the qualified contractor to starting with this construction project. Next slide. And this is the location that we were working with COG and to submit this 2020 infra grant. We proposed with approximate 1.2 mile of track, and as you can see, the yellow portion of the track line, and then we adding an additional second double track bridge at the Nice Branch, and also at the Inwood location. Next slide. Now I turn to Richie, talking about the Tarrant County side of the project.
Thanks, Dave.
I don't know if we have Richie on board, but I believe Reed could probably go ahead and do this. Reed, are you up for that?
Megan knows.
Hey, Bob, I can take care of that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so here you have our Trinity River Bridge project, which is rehabbing what was the existing bridge and adding a second track, which will be very beneficial for TRE moving forward. Next slide, please, slide 43. So here's just an overview. The limits of the project went from I-35 West to Junction Street. It's about 4,000 feet. Added a second track from I-35 to Junkins while rehabbing the existing TRE bridge. Construction cost of $25 million. We started back in December of 2018. The original completion date was scheduled in May of 2020. Right now, looks like we're targeting for both tracks to be back in service around April 26, 2020. We're about 93% complete, and we're about a week and a half away of having this done. Next slide, please, slide 44. And these are just pictures. It's just giving you an east view. So if you were standing with your back towards Dallas, this is what the project looks like. Next slide, please, slide 45. Okay, and this is just a view of the rehabilitated portion of the bridge. Next slide, please, slide 46. And again, this is just an east view of the new track. It's called Main Track 2 that will be going across the bridge. Next slide, please, slide 47. And then this is just the west view of the bridge. So if you're standing again with your back towards Dallas, looking towards Fort Worth, this is what it would look like for both tracks. The track that you have a real good view of, it's track 2, the other track. I'm sorry, track 1, the other track 2. Next slide, 48. Okay, and this is just the west view again for both the new and the rehabilitated portion of the bridge. Next slide, please, slide 49. And this is just giving an embankment view of the grading that they had to do in order to get this project completed. Next slide, please, slide 50. Again, this is the west view where you get to look at both tracks as they're being almost completed there. Next slide, please, slide 51. Next project that Trinity Metro is working on is the Trinity Lakes Station project. Trinity Metro is working with a developer to develop a new station to replace the existing Richland Hill station. It's about 0.9 miles east of the existing station as you head towards Dallas. So the status of the project, they received the FTA CE back in March of 2019. They began the final design back in May of 2019. 60% submittal was done back in July of 19. 90% submittal was done in October 19. And then our IFB was submitted in January of 2020. The IFB for civil construction was issued in February of 2020. Our bids were due in April 23rd. And then there's a slight delay there for March 26th. So our targeted NTP for civil construction contract will be somewhere around June of 2020. We're going to utilize for our track and civil construction our TRE O&M contractor, which is Herzog. It was approved by Trinity Metro's board back in March 31st of 2020 for not to exceed of $3.7 million. The target date for having this station open right now is December of 2020, the end of the year. Next slide, please, slide 52. We have another construction project on the Tarrant County side, Callaway Cemetery Crossing. We're all excited about this. Trinity Metro and Viridian moved forward with what we call option 1. And option 1 was just moving the crossing back a few hundred feet to try to straighten out the road. The current configuration has very poor view, and as you know, we've had several major accidents at this crossing. DART and Trinity Metro gave approval for the construction project to begin and to use the TRE O&M contractor. They've already begun some work. They procured long lead items like what's called the signal house for the crossing mechanism that has a long lead time, some tie replacements, and they've also done some cabling there for the new crossing. Next slide, please, slide 53. Okay, that's it for capital maintenance projects. Any questions?
All right, yes, other questions? All right, thank you very much, both of you. So our next item is an action item, approval for the use of TRE operating and maintenance contract for Trinity Lakes Station. Do we need a briefing on that before we take a vote to give everybody an idea of what this is? Or if not,
do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, and we can do that too. I would entertain a motion, state your name, and we'll do that. And then I'll call on each of you regarding the vote. And if you have a second, please make your second by stating your name and then say second.
Charles Edmonds, I'll make the motion to approve item number 9 on the agenda, the approval for the use of TRE's operating and maintenance contract for the Trinity Lakes Station.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Kennedy, seconds.
A motion and a second. I'll go ahead and we'll call the roll and say yes or no as I call your name, please. Patrick Kennedy?
Yes.
Mayor Stouffer?
Yes.
Jeff Davis?
Yes.
Charles Edmonds,
Edmonds votes aye.
Tito Rodriguez,
Yes.
Rick Stouffer.
Yes.
Mayor Stouffer has dropped apparently.
No, I'm sorry. He said yes. I had it on mute. Pardon me.
Okay, very good. So that's a unanimous vote, and we have completed that item. We'll move forward now to update.
Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor Slagle, we need to do the capital projects for the equipment, so we're going to go back to that. It wasn't split out on the agenda, so I apologize.
Capital program. This is not 12 and 13. It's still part of 9.
It is.
All right.
Yes. Okay, go ahead, Anthony.
Okay, so this gives you an overview of our capital maintenance equipment projects we have going on TRE. We have 4 current projects. First project, as you can see, is overall 2 of our locomotives. It's our F59. We call them PHIs. If you've been out and seen our locomotives, we have 2 types. One I call a slope nose. Those are the PHIs. They're the newer locomotives. And then we have the square nose locomotives, which have more of a square look. That's the PHs. So 2 of our PHIs are out for overhaul. They're we call it the OEM or original equipment manufacturer, which is Progress Rail, EMD. They're up in Tacoma, Washington. We're looking for both those locomotives to return for us around January of 2021. Now, of course, all of this is dependent upon the restrictions in place due to COVID as well. Our next project we have is our bi-level and cap car overhauls. TRE has a contract with CAD Railways up in Canada. They will be overhauling some of our coaches and cab cars. They currently have 3 TRE coaches right now that they're beginning to work on. Our next project we have going on is our locomotive purchase project. It is 2 F40 locomotives. And these locomotives look like our 2 leased units that we have. We call them L Texas, but they're F40s. Again, the contract is with Progress Rail. This work is being done in Patterson, Georgia. They are working diligently on both those locomotives for us. We're very excited about this, and we expect to receive those locomotives in April of 2021. Of course, and once we receive these locomotives, because they're different from the rest of the TRE locomotive fleet, there will be some PTC testing and certification we'll need to do before they'll be able to be placed in revenue service. And our next contract or project that we have going on is painting our existing TRE fleet. We have a contract with the company to do on-site. They have a mobile paint booth. So if you're ever out near the TRE EMF, it is on the western end of the facility on the stub track. They have 1 coach in there now, the 1057 that they're painting. And so we look forward to seeing what that finished product will look like. That is scheduled to be completed around April 2021. And then the last project you have is actually been terminated, I'll say. It was with Relco. They had 2 of our coach cars, 1051 to 55, which they were supposed to be overhauling. That contract was henceforth terminated by cause after an agreement between TRE and Relco. And so those 2 cars are actually up at CAD Railways in Canada. And so they're in the process of going through and giving us an estimate of idea of all that will need to be done to get those 2 pieces of equipment back in revenue service. Next slide, please, slide 55.
Excuse me 1 second. We've only got like 15 minutes left of this meeting, so we're going to need to kind of pick up the pace a little bit, please.
Okay. And real quickly, this is just an overview of 2 pieces of equipment that were involved in accidents that still are at the contractors having work performed on. 1063 is in Delaware. They are finishing up the last pieces of repair. and we should be, as soon as the travel restrictions are lifted, we hope to be able to go up there and do an inspection and get that coach returned back to us. Locomotive 120 is at CAD Railways. They've completed the work. We're now waiting for the travel restrictions due to COVID-19 to be lifted so that we can go up and do our inspections, and then that locomotive will be released and sent back to us here in the U.S. Next slide, please, slide 56. Okay, next slide, slide 56. Next slide, please, slide 57. And next slide, slide 58. And next slide, slide 59. Those 3 slides were just to give you an overview of TRE's whole equipment fleet, locomotives, coaches, and cab cars, and also to give you the status of those pieces of equipment.
You're muted, Mayor Slagle.
So is this part of item 9, Bonnie?
I do not have the agenda up there. It is part of the capital projects, yes.
I believe the motion that Charles Edmonds gave us was to approve this full item. Is that correct, Charles?
Which item?
Item 9, that's the one we just voted on.
Number 9. Yeah.
Which included all of these items, I believe.
Second vote.
Big pardon?
Charles is saying yes.
Made the motion on 9, and there was a second and a vote.
Yeah, so I think it's been approved.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's already been approved.
All right, so now we'll move on to update on positive train control.
Good afternoon. I'm Carl Smith, and I'll give you that brief update here. The key on this is the bottom section here, which is our budget. Of the 34.8 million, we've spent 30 million with a balance of 4.5, and committed of 4.4 million of that. Can you go on to slide 62, please? We did our line in most of 2 segments. Segment 1 was from Richland Hills to Union, which we completed in May 2019, and segment 2 from TMP to Richland Hills, and then segment 3 was the new Trinity River Bridge. We had to do it in a different stage to make it first as TREAC, and then we had it all completed in February 2020. So as of February 2020, the entire TRE alignment is fully PTC. Next slide. Slide 63, some of the accomplishments we did since our last meeting is our lab testing. We have completed all our lab testing with DJNO, Fort Worth, BNSF, and Amtrak. And UP, we did the testing, but 2 of the test cases failed. And we've recently got the new software last week, and we'll be completing those 2 test cases this week in the lab. Field testing is the next stage of interoperability, and we have completed interoperable field testing with DJNO, Fort Worth and Western, and BNSF. The 2 remaining are UP and Amtrak, and because of the COVID-19 travel restrictions, we have put these on hold while we're still communicating with UP and Amtrak each week. As soon as all the restrictions are lifted, we'll then schedule firm dates to go out and do this testing on the TRE track. Next slide, 64. So, our next steps until certification, we're still considered on the extended revenue service demonstration since June 2019, and we're expecting October 2020 around that time to get certified. Interoperability testing, we've been doing the lab testing, and we're supposed to finish in March. Again, we only have 1 test case to complete, 2 test cases to complete with UP. And then field testing we've been doing that since December until June, and these are the dates that are presented to the FRA and that we're working towards. The PTC safety plan, which is the key document that is everything that we've been doing since 2017 until now, all the testing, all the documentation that have been done, all the development was put together between June and March 2020. and the FRA now has it in their hand as of April 1st, 2020, and the typical time to review these, they're estimating is approximately 6 months. So we're hoping that in September 2020, or right at the end up to October, we will then get our letter from the FRA of certification. Next slide, please. This is the statistics of the last 6 months of how we've been performing across on the TRE. Earlier, Anthony showed the slides about where we had some lateness due to PTC. In November and February, those key times, we were doing a lot of testing, and some of our testing affected OTP. In addition, some of the testing that we're doing had software defects in them, and it showed here, if you look at where our enforcements are, in the second to last column row and the last row, how many times we had to cut out PTC. As you see in February and March, since we've put in the new software, it has improved a lot, and we rarely have to cut out now. So that's the key statistics that we're showing on this graph here, how much we've been utilizing DTC on the TRE corridor. And all of these statistics are sent to the FRA every month, and it's all combined to put with our safety plans to show that we are operating at a safe measure. That's the presentation for the PTC. Is there any questions, sir?
All righty. See if we have any questions. Apparently you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I would like to, we have a next item here is the discussion of TRE security, item 11. Do we have someone who's making that presentation?
Mayor Slagle, I think we can pass over this. This was if y'all are okay with it, this was a discussion of having security on TRE trains, and we have had, Fort Worth has security that rides the train, and we had been having the FEOs with on the trains in their uniform, with the exception of now during COVID-19 has been a little bit of a difference, but the police are still out there when we need them.
We can bring this back up again after things are lifted a bit and the ridership picks up, I would assume.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good. So now we have a couple of action items. The first, item number 12, is approval of contract modification to use contingency and increase funding for the overhaul of 2 TRE F59 PHI locomotives. We took this up at the dartboard yesterday and moved forward on that. So do we have a presentation or discussion on this item?
There is a presentation, but in the interest of time, since pretty much everyone knows that, this is just the resolution authorizing the President and Executive Director to execute a contract modification providing the additional funding for the overhaul of the 2 F59 PHIs with Progress Rail. And there are additional costs that would be split 50-50 between Trinity Metro and DART, and the total amount is $344, and I believe it was $158,000. Let me say, I'd have to go. Can you go to? Well, hold on. I've got it up here. And there would be like $76,000 right here. 76, 593 equally split between DART and Trinity Metro. It's a total of 153.86 to increase the contract.
Any questions? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Kennedy moves for approval.
Mr. Kennedy approved. Do we have a second?
Mr. Rodriguez seconds.
Mr. Rodriguez. I'll go through the vote. Mr. Stouffer?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Edmund?
Edmonds votes aye.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, the next item is is a similar item, but related item, I guess I should say. That's approval of the extension of the locomotive lease agreement and the purchase of one locomotive with grant funding. Let's move to that one then. You want to give a brief overview again, please, Bonnie?
Okay, so this is approval to extend the current locomotive lease that we have for there's two locomotives that we are leasing currently, and we are looking to extend one of them through December 31st and to purchase one of the two leased locomotives with the CMAQ money, which is Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program funds that were awarded to Trinity Railway Express. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? 77. Yeah, I won't go through the entire slide unless you have some questions, but a little bit of background. You all probably remember we've had crossing accidents. We had the installation of positive train control, and we had the two F-59s that needed to go out for overhaul. So we just, what we would like to do is to purchase one of the locomotives and lease the other one all the way to the end of this year, which would be an additional $1,020 to add to the lease agreement. To do that, just for that, and go to the next slide, 78, please. That goes 79. Okay, so we had a lease that was not to exceed $248,200. We leased two units. They're the LTEX units. They're the different color ones. They're not the TRE locomotives. You may have seen them out there. It's $340 per locomotive per day, and the lease does end April 30th. So we would like to keep them leased all the way through beyond April 30th through December 31st of 2020. Next slide, 80. So if we lease and purchase, this is just a slide on to lease both of the locomotives through August 29th of 2020. The cost was $248,200, and to carry the lease
is now exiting.
To carry the lease all the way through the end of this year of 2020 would be an additional $84,320, and to lease one locomotive through December 31st would be, as I said, $1,020, and the purchase of one total amount would be $2,674,850, and that's with the overhaul and with that. And the grant is 80%. It's $2,139,880, and the remaining 20% that we would have to match would be 10% by DART and 10% Trinity Metro, and each would be 50-50 at $267,485. Slide 81. So our recommendation is to extend the current locomotive lease through December 31st for one locomotive, and approval to purchase one of the two leased F40PH locomotives once the grant money from the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program is awarded to Trinity Railway Express. And that is the conclusion of this presentation, although I went through it very quickly. So,
are there questions or discussion on this item? Then I would entertain a motion.
Move approval, Rich Stouffer.
Have a motion for approval by Mayor Stouffer. We have a second.
Second by Rodriguez.
We have a second by Mr. Rodriguez. All right. Then I will take the vote. Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mayor Stouffer,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds,
Vote aye.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
And I vote aye as well. That vote is unanimous. The next, we have two briefing items and then another action item. The first briefing item is the Silver Line, status of the Silver Line. It's 4 o'clock, so I'm not sure how we want to handle this, so I'm going to leave it.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I would pass so that you can get to your final action item.
All right. Status of TextRail. Any update on TextRail that we'd like to discuss?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think we would pass as well so we could get to the action item.
Okay. All right. Very good. Then the action item is the selection of the TRE committee chair. And I am rolling off and have been here probably longer than I should. But it now goes into the hands of the Trinity Metro. So if you folks want to make your nomination, and then we'll have the committee vote on it.
Jeff, are you on the call?
Yeah.
Do you want to make the motion?
Who's
For you to be chair?
Yeah. Would you like to serve as chair?
Are we muted?
You are not. You're live.
Yes, I certainly do, but I want to give you the opportunity.
Well, I'll nominate Charles Edmonds to be chair.
All right. Do we have a second?
Mayor Stouffer, second.
All right. And we'll take a vote. Mr. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Stouffer,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds.
Edmonds votes aye.
All right. So we've done that, and that passes unanimously. So congratulations. Next item is identification of future agenda items. If you have any contact, I guess, either of the executive directors, or if you'd like to bring something up now, you can. All right. Then with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. It is 4:05.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Jessica Powers is now exiting.
Thanks, Gary.
You bet. Take care, Bob.
Reed Lanham.
Is now exiting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Slago. Appreciate your leadership during this past year or so.
Tito Rodriguez.
Hey, Tim.
Is now exiting.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor Slago.
Yep. Thank you now. See you guys.
See you later.
Yep. Bye now.
Mayor Stouffer? Is everyone off the call? Okay.
We survived.
Not bad, girl. Let me give you a hug. I need to buy you dinner or something, girl. No, it wasn't that bad.
No, that's what I'm saying. And sometimes we have to keep